If you follow Palestine, it's unbelievable. They will even pick up children by the collar of their shirts and hang them over railings just to terrorize the people. So there are many forms of terrorization, but of course, we need to focus and make sure that the civilian targets, the multiple forms of militarized attacks on civilian areas are concretely studied, are hyped, are made to be very visible to the people at large. We know that the Adivasis and rural populations in Telangana, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, and Odisha in India have reported more frequent drone strikes in the communities in the past 2 years, especially those struggling for their forest and land. Aerial bombings and various heinous criminal acts are part of the arsenal of the monopoly capital to ensure that people are silenced. But we know that is not going to happen. We already have proof in hand. 75 years of Nakba, 76 years of resistance from Jammu and Kashmir, and the genuine quest for liberation in Balochistan, the heroic forging ahead of the New People's Army are all inspirations that tighten the web of solidarity and determination among us, the people of the world. It is the constant fighting of these groups who have withstood intense butchery, who have faced unimaginable tortures and terrors. We feel if they can do it, then of course we can do it. Those who live outside the territories of these such atrocities. But I hope that in here, in these safe spaces, we can encourage more and more voices to come forward and speak and find among ourselves the way to overcome these forces that are destroying our lives and our livelihoods, our lands, our forests, our environment. If actually there is no other way but to go ahead, create a mass mobilization to stand up and fight. And there is no doubt, there is absolutely no doubt that we will overcome. Thank you once again for organizing this and for the solidarity of our organizations and our people. I look forward to a very, very dynamic webinar and the outcomes of such webinars in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azra. Indeed, these bombings are not solely perpetrated by the respective countries' governments and security forces. It's being supported, funded, and commanded by imperialist powers, especially the United States of the Americas and its military-industrial complex. Now, to fight these, yes, while we strengthen our movements, we should also have monitoring, data gathering, and reporting in place to substantiate our calls, stop the bombings, and defend our communities from fascism and militarist attacks. Again, to remind everyone, we are live on Facebook and also in YouTube. Please see the links in the chat box and share them widely as well. Now, let's zoom in on how these bombings take place and how it affects the people and their communities. Just 2 years ago, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was shocked with the military takeover of the junta in Myanmar. Not only it deposed the democratically elected government, but it suppressed dissent and all forms of protest and resistance by the Burmese people. This is most especially felt by indigenous peoples in the Burmese countryside. The Karen people struggles against the military junta in Myanmar and its frequent aerial bombings in their communities. The Karen Human Rights Group has been closely monitoring these state-sponsored rights abuses. And to know more about this and underscore the situation of Karen people amid the junta's militarization, let's call on Albert Su.
Su. I'm the advocacy coordinator at the Korean Human Rights Group. So I just would like to share about, like previously, I shared about the situation of the State Administration Council indiscriminate shelling, the airstrike impact. These are ongoing. People across the country has suffered from these attacks, especially with the airstrike. So alone in the Korean state, only in the airstrike that caused the casualty, there are already 160 times of the airstrike that is happening in the Korean state. And civilians in the Korean state are severely suffer from these attacks. Same thing with the shelling, also more than 300 times already happening. And even with this mortar shelling and indiscriminate shelling, even there's no fighting, the State Administration Council forces are regularly conducting this shelling on a daily basis, which caused the casualty. Civilian being injured or killed, their livestock being injured and killed as well. And same thing with the other destruction, especially with the civilian houses, school, clinics, and the religious buildings such as monastery and churches are being destroyed by these attacks. These attacks cause a huge impact and security risk for the local communities. Just recently, one of the strikes that is happening in the Korean state, it not just only kill the civilian, destroy the non-living things such as the building, but also even destroy the grave. So if you are already dead and you are in the coffin at the grave,
Recording in
finally,
progress.
I want to conclude my sharing here with few important recommendations. First, to acknowledge that the military junta is the root cause of the current human rights and humanitarian crisis, and refrain from giving any legitimacy to the junta, including signing agreement with them and presenting credentials to them. And also, we would like to call on to support current investigation and proceeding to prosecute the junta leaders and seek out all additional opportunity through the ad hoc tribunal, universal jurisdiction, and other mechanisms to hold the Burma military accountable for their vast area of the crimes. And also to broaden the scope of the accountability in the future proceeding to include SAC crime committed against the current people, not yet covered current investigation, as well as to investigate the war crime of the collective punishment and the crime against humanity of the persecution. And finally, to increase financial support for and collaboration with the local human rights organization and actor operating on the ground to ensure that the widest representation of the voice and the experience of the oppressed people in Burma are considered. Thank you. This is all I would like to share today.
Thank you very much, Saul. Yep, that's a very visual and graphic. Thank you so much for sharing that to us. With airstrikes, combatants and non-combatants alike are fair game, as these warheads are created for the sole purpose of destruction, can decimate an entire community, including structures, homes, farmlands, and any form of life, and leave lethal to none witness to the atrocities. For that matter, we encourage everyone to share their thoughts and questions in the chat. If anything piques your interest, let's also bring this conversation in social media by using our hashtags silenced suffering and hashtag stop the bombings. Now let's travel a little westward and hear it from our delegate from West Bengal in India. Today we have Tathagata Roy Chowdhury from the Revolutionary Students Front. Take it away, Tathagata. The floor is yours.
Thank you. There appears to be some problem with my camera, so I will just be speaking if that's no problem.
No worries.
Thank you. Most of us know that on 11th January 2023, significant border regions of Telangana, Chhattisgarh, and Odisha was targeted. An aerial bombing campaign was launched in South Bastar's Pamid and Kistaram blocks at the Chhattisgarh-Telangana border from 11 a.m. onward in the Makanguda, Metaguda, Botathong, Sakiler, Botalanka, Raspali, and Erpad areas. On the same day, a huge combing operation was also started in the Saranda jungles of Jharkhand by Cobra and CRPF, where there was firing from helicopters. So, this is not the first time that such an aerial bombing operation to suppress terrorist movements, to suppress revolutionary movements have been conducted in these areas. Aerial bombs fell from the skies in April in the last 2 years, 2021, on 19th April 2021 and on 15th April 2022, and again for the fourth time in 16th April 2023 as well. We have had 4 instances of aerial bombings in the last 3 years. In the Vietnam War, we saw thousands of tons of aerial bombing by the US Air Force during Operation Rolling Thunder. The great majority of people in South Vietnam, as you know, worked in agriculture prior to American intervention, and very similar to the Indian condition, the many lands of the South Vietnamese agricultural lands were destroyed, and they were considered unusable for agriculture due to the toxic chemicals and the ongoing bombardment. So we have a continuing crisis of these workers who are losing their livelihoods, who are losing their only way to earn their livelihood since this continuous aerial bombing and further degradation of the land. Even 57 years ago, we saw the aerial bombardment of the struggling Mizo people who were struggling for their right to self-determination. And they were also bombed by the Indian Air Force in Aizawl. We have seen how the planes launched from Tezpur, Kumbhigram, and Jorhat in Assam fired upon the town with machine guns first and then launched flammable explosives. It is extremely easy to notice a pattern here. Whenever the ruling classes attempt to prevent an insurgency, they attempt to prevent protests, they have 2 objectives in mind in cases with aerial bombings. They want to seize the resources of the land for themselves, and they want to isolate the insurgents from the masses. The federal and the state Indian governments began signing countless memorandums of understanding, the MOUs as we call them, with various local and international multinational corporations looking for new markets to invest in and reap financial rewards. They found the forested areas in the states of Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, where bauxite, iron ore, uranium, limestone, marble, dolomite, and many other mineral resources are found in plentiful. To steal these resources, large mining and steel producers like the Mittals, the Jindals, the Tata, the Vedanta corporations, they negotiated MOUs, as I said, with the relevant state governments and the central government. And whenever the government intends to do with aerial strikes is to clear these mountains and forests of villagers, so the corporate organizations can start mining the resources. In the same way, the government has launched Operation Samadhan Prohar 3 as a continuation of the previous Operation Green Hunt. We know that the government calls these operations as fronts for, it terms them as fronts for the suppression of the revolutionary communist forces who are resisting the attack of the corporate sharks along with the masses who are fighting with their lives, who are sacrificing themselves for the masses. We have seen in the second phase of Operation Green Hunt, a large number of air bases and helipads were constructed in order to undertake aerial attacks and aid the ground forces. Helicopters and drones were increasingly brought into use. The state governments and the central governments have taken a much more strict and aggressive stance, and in their effort to destroy it completely have set up forward defense areas, as they call it, to deploy large-scale forces in to attack the areas in control of the protests, in control of the rebels. According to the government, the forces that attack its rivals need not attack from the district or the centers, but from the camps in the areas of the movement. Their strategy has remained the same since the beginning of time. It's encirclement and suppression. Deployment of the army in the fifth schedule of in the fifth scheduled areas of tribal people in the case of India is not only unconstitutional, but it is also against the UNO's Indigenous Peoples Charter. The Indian Armed Forces, the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force, according to legislature, are supposed to combat external enemies. And if they are to be deployed in on Indian territory, there needs to be a declared civil war. But no such laws have been put into motion. According to official international humanitarian law, aerial bombings and all other such armed aerial attacks, they cannot be conducted on civilians who do not have the same military firepower to combat them, to fight them back. So we have been seeing massive protests against these attempts to amend the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act and the Santal Parganas Tenancy Act. The Pathalgadi movement has emerged as one of the largest mass movements in the world against fascist judiciary. It is calling for the stringent application of legislature intended for the governance of tribal regions as designated under the constitution. The provisions literally give the Adivasis or the tribals their own supremacy, their own authority, their own rights over the land and forests in which they live. In mass movements in villages of Sukma like Singaram, Gompad, and Bijapur's Pusnar, where the aerial attacks have taken place, the people have come out on strike for their demands of the honor and dignity of their women, against the establishment of police and paramilitary camps, and selling out their Jal Jangal Zameen Izzat, which means basically water, forest, land, and honor to the comprador capitalists. In a word, they have come out on in strike against militarization and corporatization. On 24th December 2020, almost around 50,000 people mobilized in Bijapur to protest against the new police camps being set up. We would like to call upon all our friends in the international community, all the human rights defenders, all the all of our friends who are in this network and even beyond, to, as my previous comrades put it, to give no legitimacy to the Modi government, to demand stop to Operation Samadhan and Prohar, to stop to demand stop the signature of the governments in MOUs with the corporate sharks, to for the immediate release of all political prisoners arrested from such mass movements, and to immediately especially stop the aerial bombings and all other such armed aerial attacks, even whether it be from helicopter fire or napalm. We would like to call upon the international community to stand strong with the Indian masses, to stand in solidarity with the Indian masses who are struggling for their honor, who are struggling for their lives, who are struggling for their dignity, and who are struggling for their own rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatagata. Yes, these bombings do not only destroy livelihoods, but also makes recovery impossible for the communities. And as you have mentioned, this doesn't matter to the government perpetrator, since the corporate interests always come first. Yeah, we should all stand in solidarity with one another to oppose these inhumane and these militaristic attacks that is being implemented in the name of the counterinsurgency program by the prime imperialist power, the United States of America. Now, just a gentle reminder for all of our speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters to catch up. Yes, by the way, we have Bahasa interpretation available. Please click the interpretation button in the app. These bombings do not solely happen on the provinces mentioned by Tatagata. It also happens in the northeast part of India. So for this, let's listen to a video by Jiten Yumnam from the Center for Research and Advocacy, Manipur. Tech video.
I'm Jiten Yumnam from Manipur. Right now, Manipur is embroiled in multiple layers of conflict situation. The recent conflict is more of a conflict within the indigenous Meitei and the Kuki tribes in Manipur. And this conflict has led to major humanitarian crises with several communities, including women, children, elderly from both communities displaced, of more than 60,000 people displaced in various districts in Manipur. The violence and the humanitarian crisis is, despite the fact that Manipur is one of the most militarized region across Asia region. The Indian Army has been deployed in Manipur extensively under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act of 1958 to counter the indigenous armed self-determination movement in Manipur. One of the major complaints in Manipur is the partisan role of the Indian Army during the conflict situation. And there are complaints that the Indian security forces are directly responsible in targeting the media and also the indigenous women, and also in condoning some of the arsoning and the direct violence perpetrated by one of the major community in Manipur. And at this point of time, it is extremely important that the government of India take an urgent step to end violence within the Kuki and the Meitei community in Manipur. It is extremely important that the humanitarian crisis suffered by both Meitei and the Kuki communities are being responded, so that all the displaced people are able to return back to their original home, in different parts of Manipur. And according to the different calls of Manipur, it's extremely important that the government of India also revise its peace agreement with some of the ethnic groups, because the perpetuation of peace agreement or suspension of operation with particular armed groups, particular ethnic groups in an overlapping territory. It has actually fueled more violence. It has actually fueled more misunderstanding, tension, and conflict in Manipur. No? And one of the major call here is also to repeal and also to withdraw some of the emergency special laws like the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which are which confer extra emergency powers to the government of India to suspend some of the fundamental rights. No? So these are some of the immediate demands, and then another demand that has come forward is asking the government of India and its security forces to stop all form of violence on the people, including arsoning and also targeting the media or even harassment to the women folk in Manipur. So that's been one of the major demand here. And accordingly, Manipur is also facing a lot of development aggression, perpetuated by the multinational companies of not just the government of India but also other from other developed countries, and this also contribute in fueling more conflict and more misunderstanding among the different indigenous communities. So accordingly, it is important that the government of India stop all forms of development aggression targeting the indigenous people's land and territory in Manipur. At this point of time, what is most important is to take urgent and immediate action to stop violence and also to foster peace and normalcy in Manipur at this point of time, and also to tackle the humanitarian crisis pervading in Manipur. Thank you very much.
Brought by militarization does not only stop in displacement, but affects vulnerable sectors, including women and children and people with special needs in the long term. Governments and their security forces should be held accountable on these crimes, as these are not simply humanitarian crises involving different groups, indigenous groups for that matter, but crises perpetrated in the name of profit and power. And the laws in place that legitimize these attacks, these bombings should be revoked. We thank the Center for Research and Advocacy Manipur for sharing this to us, so we know their situation. Now, aerial bombings have been becoming more frequent in the Philippines in recent years. Although these bombings result in death and destruction in rural communities, they usually go unreported. Today, we have with us Lina Ladino, farmer from Tanggol, Magsasaka, who will share the situation of farmer communities in the Philippines and how these bombings affect them. Kindly remind everyone to tune in to the English channel for interpretation. Go ahead, Miss Lina.
Naimbag nga malem agsapa wenarabi kanya tayo sa dinuman apagilyan tayo.
Good evening to all of us. I am Lina, a farmer and an indigenous person. As a poor farmer and indigenous person, we are faced with many problems. These include high prices of farm inputs, such as seeds and fertilizers, while our products are bought at a low price. The prices of basic commodities such as food and oil are increasing, while there is lack of basic government social services for us farmers and indigenous peoples, even in times of calamities. Many farmers are also facing problems of land grabbing and ejection from their farmlands and home sites. In addition to this, the militarization in our communities in Cagayan Valley aggravated our situation. When we voice out our problems, hoping for the government to help us, we are instead answered with harassment and violence. I'm one of the victims of red tagging, surveillance and surrender campaign, and intimidation of the AFP, the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Militarization intensified, leading to continuous bombings in the various rural communities here in the province of Cagayan. Every year since 2021, incidents of aerial bombing, shellings, and machine gun strafing by the military have intensified in Cagayan. This year, 3 new EDCA military bases are being constructed in our region to be used in the US proxy war and the warmongering of China. Yearly, Balikatan war exercises and more military operations seek to clear the area around the EDCA sites. Newly brought expensive war machines like the helicopters, Black Hawks, are used for the first time here in victimizing our IP and peasant communities. The state is also aiming to disempower the progressive people's movement in the area, forcing us farmers and indigenous people to surrender our organizations and to surrender our rights and our future. These EDCA sites spell more plunder and exploitation of our resources, ejection, and hunger for displaced farmers. These are the bombing incidents in Cagayan. There are even cases of forced evacuations of the affected communities, such as in Sitio Bagsang, Santa Clara, Gonzaga, and in Hacienda Int'l, due to fear and the dangerous situation. Classes of students have also stopped until the tension eased. Movement of residents to go outside or come back to their villages was heavily restricted by checkpoints. Some houses were also ransacked and their rice and food stocks stolen by soldiers. Worse, the soldiers enforced an information blackout, warning residents not to talk to anyone about the bombings. The AFP stated that these bombings are results of the presence of the NPA rebels and that there were encounters in these areas. However, according to the people, they did not see any NPA in the area. There are many civilians affected by these bombings.
September 21, 2022, Barangay Dungeg, Santa Teresita, Cagayan.
Here are the bombing incidents in Cagayan.
2022, Barangay Santa Clara, Gonzaga, Cagayan. April 4, 2022, Sitio Lingapan, Santo Niño. June 3, 2022, Paco Valley, Apayao. February 2, 2023, Barangay Hacienda Int'l, Paggao, Cagayan. February 14, 2023, Barangay Santa Margarita, Paggao, Cagayan. February 25, 2023, Barangay Tanglagan, Gataran, Cagayan. March 19, 2023, Barangay Santa Margarita. March 20, 2023, Blue Water, Santa Margarita, Baggao, Cagayan. Adda dagiti manalor nga andan nataripato dagiti baboy, manok, aso, tanabati dagiti.
The most affected are the indigenous peoples, the residents. There are bombing incidents where people, while they are planting and the only source of their livelihood, are destroyed. There were carabaos that were hit by the bombs. The bombings also brought fear and trauma to the residents. Because of the fear, the residents did not attend to their farms. There are news blackouts in the areas about the incidents, and the military, they are telling the residents not to say anything, not to post anything about the bombings. They continuously say that this is due to the presence of the New People's Army, the rebels, but the people said that they did not see any NPA in the area. This brings trauma and stress to the residents and to the affected communities.
ket Kimaro. Dagiti kagatgatang nga nanginang nga makina, panggera, pas kumait ti attack 129.
The people around the area experienced the bombings of the jet fighters used by the military, and most of the victims are the farmers and indigenous peoples. These war machines are their new machines for the EDCA and the US bases of now being constructed in our region in Cagayan.
Adda dagiti mapapanaw iti bukod da adaga. Agresulta iti gisin kang runaan iti manalon ti mangmangged. Nakurapay
This results to the grave effects of these bombings to the farmers. The military presence and the US presence in our region results to prostitution and to the suffering of our women farmers. We are treated as pawns by our government so that they can have an area for their exercises, and we can be used as the launching pads to oppress other peoples in other countries. These are some of our
Sardeng ti military ti panagbomba ti pinaduma-duma nga komunidad. Agkay-kaysa dagiti umili pinaduma-duma mga pagilian namang kondena.
Even if this is happening, our peoples and our organizations are united and are campaigning against these atrocities by our government and by the military. We call for the military to stop the bombings in the communities, for the government to conduct an immediate and thorough and truthful investigation of the incidents, and provide sufficient support to the victims, including psychosocial rehabilitation. We call for the people of the different countries to unite in condemning and in speaking out about the injustices of these bombings that will destroy the source of livelihood of farmers. And we call for the resumption of peace talks between the government of the NDF, the National Democratic Front, and the government of the Philippines to address the roots of armed conflict and the reasons why people are suffering. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lina. While immense and highly detrimental, these bombings are only one part of a bigger problem that is economic inequality. To quell dissent and the people's clamor for better lives, bombs and guns come in hand while the rights of the people are disregarded. On the pretext of peacekeeping and counterinsurgency, people's organizations are considered fair game by state security forces and paramilitary units. Once again, please feel free to share your thoughts on social media using the hashtags silence suffering and stop the bombings. With information blackout in the mainstream, a people's movement to expose our situation is very crucial. So we thank all of you who joined us here in Zoom today, our friends from the media who value human rights, the organizations that are present here, APRN, PCFS, IPMSDL, RSF, KMP, Tanggol Magsasaka, the Karen Human Rights Group, Ibon International, Vikas Adiayan Kendra, West Papuan Youth Network, the Roots for Equity, and many others. Before we move on to the next speaker, Let's watch this video from Artista para sa Rebolusyong Pangkultura or RPAC entitled Exorcism in the Field.
Eksorsismo sa sakahan. Marunong rin magtanim ang tigreng papel. Bakod ng walang sustansya, distansya mula sa nalulukot na sikmurat na mimintig na paa. Metal na nguso, pangil na tingga. May binhing poot at tusang pataba. Sa eksorsismo, kailangan ang ngalan ng demonyo. Kaya tuso ang mga layaw na chip at don. Halik at hagkan ang krus matapos mamako ng maurira. Panaboy ang magsasaka nila ay Arkanghel Miguel na itim. Inaagiw ang karit na pantabas sa sukay ng sakim. Sa ritmo ng nakaw na kalansying iniikot, ang tambyolo ng tiempo muerto, tapyas porsyento. Di tinatabla ng swerte, dasal o pagsusumamo. Dikta ang netong kitang kakarampot na piso. At presyong kartel sa sibuyas na tubog sa ginto. Pero walang salat sa handaan ng bolero. Sa letrang B, Judas. Sa letrang I, 32. Tantos ay labi sa labi, latay sa nakaratay. Sa full house may blackout, bantay sarado. Sa libreng espasyo may X, Joaquin Bordado. Dilubyo rin ng dibuho ni Mother Cory most pure. Tagabinbin titulo, gatong panakot, tugos sa dilaw na kweli. Tulad nina, nagmalakas at nagmaganda, turing sati payaso. Inaagnas sa kaibuturan ang puso ng berdugo ng mga kasama. O dakilang manunubos, siyadya mo kami sa lahat ng masama.
That is quite agitating. We, as part of movements who struggle for human rights and peace, should continue to explore all forms of media, literature, and art to reach more people who will join us in our struggle. From here, let's call on Sayang Mandabayan from Merdeka West Papua Support Network for their message of solidarity. Sayang, please take the floor.
Sore kawan-kawan, nama saya Sayang Mandabayan, saya dari Merdeka West Papua Support Network. Saat ini saya berada di
Sorry,
Papua Barat.
now I'm in West Papua.
Konflik yang berkepanjangan di tanah Papua
The long
adalah
conflict in
persoalan
Papua
politik masa lalu.
is the problem of
Saat
political in the
Negara
past,
Republik Indonesia masuk
where Indonesia
dan
came in.
pada 1 Juli besok kita akan memperingati Hari
At
Proklamasi
1st
Kemerdekaan
July, we're going to commemorate the proclamation of independence of Papua
Indonesia
in 1971.
menganeksasi
Indonesia annexed Papua through PEPERA, which is UNLAW, and this caused rebellion until the proclamation on 1 July 1971. Before the PEPERA, in 1967, Indonesia already have contract with Freeport to get the gold in Papua, and it is still happening until now. The impact, the role of minority to defend the rights that has raised the fight. The Freeport only distract the society and also the natural in Papua. The suffering of Papua people of Papua caused by the rich natural resources. So the land is no longer a gift, but causing the suffering of the people. The resistance movement continues from time to time, and there are a lot of victims. The state doing violence through military operation, which is continuous, but the people denied to obedient. They keep struggling. We see if modernization of knowledge and science, if internet does not exist until now and do not yet in the Papua, probably we're already vanished from this land and only become a legend or history right now. Only a story that there has been a Papuan people in this land. Violence makes the people do not want to obedient. We learn from other uh, my ethnic. If they do not fight, they will vanish. So that is why we need to rise and fight. In April 2023, there is a bombing done by the military in Duga. That is a conflict zone, which is worse right now, caused by the hostage of a pilot from New Zealand. But the Indonesian government denied that they used the bombing in the event against TPN. TPN is like Liberation Army of Papua, and we support them. We Papuan people support TPN because we cannot do our fight without also have this kind of military. TPN today, TPN today fight politically and also for the customary land. In 2022, there's also a bridge for operation on an operation. There is 40,000 hectare has 200 billion gold. The imperialists do not care about the human rights, the impact to the people, to the environment. Their orientation is only on our natural resources. They do not care about human rights. We traumatized by Freeport. We do not any other companies about this because the promises made by the company is not exist. They are using violence to suppress us, and it causes trauma. And what the government do is aim to traumatize us. The Indonesian military denied the use of bomb. The pilot captain from New Zealand that is now being hostage by TPN in the video in the video on 24th of April 2023 has called the military to not use the bomb because it threat his life. In 1999, when TPN want to do negotiation, they are tricked by the military and the government of Indonesia. There is no good negotiation. They came and then do the ceasefire. The Indonesian government is also not care to human rights. We can see it from 27 June, 3 days ago. The Indonesian President Joko Widodo has do the the overcoming of human rights violation in Papua without the law. So the Indonesia government no longer believe to the law. So they release the perpetrator of the human rights violation in Papua without law or outside the judiciary. Bombing in Duga, we saw there is a new type of bomb that has much worse impact to the Papua. That is provincial expansion in Papua. Because the expansion of the provincial will cause a faster genocide. The amount of transmigration will be bigger. It will add more police and military in Papua. This is the bigger bomb rather than the chemical bomb from the air. We cannot uh, we cannot hope to our government because the government is the perpetrator. That is why we really need this kind of forum, and we are thank you for you to invite us to this forum. And we want to have your solidarity from indigenous people all over the world to stand with us to support our struggle. We deny to obedient to the government. We deny to forget about the past. Today, I'm sorry that I cannot present some videos or photos, but you can see it through Jubi in West Papua and Suara Papua. Because we do not believe the Indonesian media because they always uh, uh, write a hoax. Until 2022, the number of refugee in Duga is 99,000. And there's also another regency. There are a lot of regency where there is internally displaced people happening. So we can say that the military operation aims to displace the people from their land so they can control the customary land. I am sure that all of us are the society or the people who have the customary land who then attacked by the capitalists, and also victim of our government who do not support us and even attack us. I am Sayang Mandabayan. Ask for solidarity greeting.
Very much, Sayang. I agree. We should all support every movement for liberation and self-determination against militarist expansionism and fascism of any form. One way to support these struggles is to take part in this platform that we have. Once again, we remind everyone to use the hashtags silence suffering and stop the bombings if you're posting quotes or takeaways from this webinar. We are live in Facebook and YouTube, so please just see the links in the chat box. Now we move on to our question and answer portion. Uh, we kindly request everyone to use the raised hand function if you want to ask any question or share your takeaways. Can we do to contribute to the silenced suffering campaign? Uh, yep. So, anyone here, any speaker can take this question and share your insights. Anyone can intervene and answer the question. All right, we have Gail from People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty. Please take the floor.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So I am Gail from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, and we are one of the organizations behind the campaign Silent Suffering. So what are the things that we can do to contribute to the campaign? So first and foremost, let's share what we have learned from this webinar to our networks so that we get to call attention to the rural bombings that's happening, which is an alarming trend right now. Uh, Another thing that we could do is to well document or report if there are any bombings that is happening in your communities. Because this campaign, one of our components is to document all these bombings and really have a, recorded or a more concerted effort when it comes to documenting all these bombings. And of course, we could show our solidarity to the different movements that have shared their current situation here. So this campaign has more events that will be organized in the coming days that will zero in on the situation of the countries that we have featured today. So it would be great if we can join these events, uh, even if you just listen to them online and of course share what you learn from them. And yeah, so those are just some of the things that we can do to support the campaign. You can check out our social media and our on what we can do in the future for more information. Thank you.
So please visit the website or email the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty if you have any inquiries about Silenced Suffering campaign. Now we have another one here from Erpan. Question is for Sayang, I believe. Question is, what is the current struggle in Papua? Please take the floor, Sayang.
Saat ini ada banyak
Now, there are a lot of organizations, but we are in one coordinative organization, WLMWP. Now we are in struggle to be part of Melanesia Group. That's a civil organization and also military wing of 1 July is TPNPB. They are doing struggle from campuses, students, farm workers in Papua. And today, we also build solidarity, like I said before. For us to have internet right now, our suffering, our struggle, we can bring it to international level. But of course, the violence by the Indonesian government is still happening. We're still doing our struggle with the street protests, online forums, although that's not freely conducting because we need to fulfill the regulation, information letter to the police, and it also probably causing violence. In any effort, there should be situation of violence. Me, myself, is also a political prisoner because of a protest on the situation of Papua. They called me monkey. We did a protest. There are a lot of people got arrested, and one of them is me. And we're doing a lot of struggle right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sayang. Thank you very much for our speakers, friends, and our colleagues here in Zoom. That is quite a fruitful one. However, in the interest of time, we can only allow as many questions. Now, we would like to show you a video featuring the website of Silenced Suffering. You may visit it through www.militarismmonitor.net/silenced suffering. Through this website, you can find the rural bombing map with the goal to have an early warning system in cases of aerial bombings and explosions. You can report a bombing incident. Learn more about the campaign and how we can all take action. Again, the website is www.militarismmonitor.net/silenced suffering. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. So again, for those organizations interested to report any case of bombing, aerial strikes, shelling, or any form of explosive related military operations in rural communities, please visit the website www.militarismmonitor.net/silenced suffering. All right, we have heard the testimonies from our speakers and have seen Silence Suffering website. It is now time for us to reaffirm our commitment to end the bombings and to bring the accountable governments and armed forces to justice. To conclude today's event, um, let's have the unity statement. We will not be silenced read in this forum. Okay, let me. All right, for this statement, let's have Amira Lidasan from Moro Christian People's Alliance to read this one to us.
Hello, I will be reading for the gathering that we have today. So we will not be silent. This is a unity statement against the bombing of indigenous people. We have been are sounding the alarm on the ongoing atrocities committed against indigenous and rural peoples in conflict areas around the world. In recent years, there has been an alarmingly significant increase in state-led attacks, especially area bombardment on rural communities. Attacks have led to widespread death, injury, displacement, and destruction. Communities are paying the price for unjust wars. In 2021, over half of the 19,470 reported casualties in explosions were civilians. This marks the first increase in 7 years. The use of explosives in populated areas takes an obscene toll on civilians, with more than 90% of those killed being non-combatants. Explosions from ground shelling, airstrikes, and improvised explosive devices cause deaths, injuries, and psychological harm to bomb populations. An ongoing international war, rising militarism worldwide, and fragmented multilateralism make unified action in seeking accountability for war crimes, human rights violations, and peace building more complex. Changing the character of warfare. Since the Iraq War, drone strikes have become more ubiquitous and deadly. Governments, including Burma's junta, employ strikes and drone capabilities to pacify and control rural and indigenous peoples. This escalating use of drones by various countries, including export nations like Burma, the Philippines, India, and the Palestinian territories, with staggering records of wanton human rights violations, has altered the landscape of civil wars and state-perpetrated violence. The threat of permanent warfare looms over rural areas, exacerbating the already burdensome psychological toll of bombings and conflicts. In addition to the physical violence, these attacks also devastate the economic, social, and cultural fabric of rural communities. They disrupt livelihoods, destroy homes and schools, and sow fear and uncertainty. Disproportionately, the victims of these attacks are indigenous peoples and rural communities. These communities are often marginalized and have limited access to resources and services. They are also more vulnerable to attacks because they live in remote areas and have less access to information and protection. What the communities need. We are particularly concerned about the largely unreported, unaccounted for, and unaddressed nature of these atrocities. These factors make justice for the people living in these war zones even more elusive, and indeed, despite international law and local laws, There is little to no justice for survivors of this attack. We call on the international community to take urgent action to stop this atrocity and ensure that those responsible are held accountable. We urge you to join us in speaking out against these atrocities and demanding justice for the victims and survivors. Unity and calls to action. Indigenous peoples and rural peoples living in conflict areas of Burma, the Philippines, Bangsamoro, West Papua, Palestine, India, and Pakistan face similar atrocities by state forces. The increase in state-led attacks, especially aerial bombardment, have led to not only damage and deaths in the communities, but also long-term displacement, violations of economic and social cultural rights, and threats to people's welfare. Indigenous people and rural human rights defenders in many global south countries, especially in Burma, the Philippines, and West Papua, face increased state-led attacks amid escalating conflicts, especially in the last 5 years. Colonial wars and subjugation in Palestine, Burma, and West Papua are being deceitfully categorized as civil wars to deny the rights of self-determination and liberation inherent in these struggles. Despite international treaties, IHL, or the International Humanitarian Law, and local laws in respecting rules of engagement, there is little to no access to justice for survivors of these area bombardments and human rights violations in these countries. There is a huge gap in monitoring, verifying, and reporting these human rights violations in rural areas, given the limitation of state-led and media reporting. Community-led monitoring and reporting has been proven to be the most robust and action-centered or action-oriented framework in seeking justice for these communities. There is an urgent need for international solidarity and action among indigenous peoples and rural communities and rural human rights defenders in conflict areas in uncovering and exposing these escalated atrocities. Stop the bombing of indigenous and rural communities, hold the perpetrators accountable, demand justice for victims and survivors of rural bombings, and build solidarity and work together to deter future bombings. And can I also, this is our UD's statement, and aside from that, I want to also congratulate all the brave friends that we have, the brave fellow human rights defenders that we have, who have given their testimonies here and even gave us pointers on how to confront the state perpetrated area bombardments and violence that has been that has attacked our communities and ourselves as human rights defenders. So we continue our fight for defending our rights, and we continue our fight for the protection of our communities. Wassalamualaikum to all of you.
Continue our fight. Thank you very much, Amira, for that wonderful statement, for finding time despite being in transit right now. So yeah, thank you, and please be safe on your trip. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending Silence Suffering, public launch of this campaign. We the program ends here, but before we all go, we remind you that you can visit the website at militarismmonitor.net/silenced suffering, and for the unity statement, please you can find it in the same website. Before we all go, we kindly ask everyone to open their cameras so